Bonjour, salut. I welcome all of you to today's class. Today we are going to learn Passé Composé, which is a very important tense in French. And for that, I'm going to use PPT. Let's see that. Yes. Well, I am Parthiban. I teach French and English and also theory of knowledge, which is one of the core subjects in international baccalaureate. Yeah, I also write content and I also translate from French to English, English to French, and there are some other languages into which also I translate. Now, like I said, today we are going to learn Passé Composé, which is one of the four main compound tenses in French. Now, before I start teaching you Passé Composé, I would like to briefly tell you what a compound tense is. Well, see, like I said, there are basically four compound tenses. Those compound tenses are passé composé, plusque parfait, futur antérieur, and conditional passé. These are the four main compound tenses which are used in French. Now, why are they called compound tenses? The reason is when a sentence is written in a compound tense, it will have two verbs. Two verbs are combined. That is why these tenses are called compound tenses. What are those two verbs? One is the auxiliary verb and the other one is the past participle of the main verb. Now, I'm repeating. A compound tense is a tense in which there will be two verbs. The first one is the auxiliary verb and the other one is the main verb. The main verb will be in the past participle form. Now, I also will tell you why a verb is called a main verb. The main verb is the verb which shows the action. Of course, you all know that the purpose of a verb is to show the action of the subject. So the verbs which show the action of the subject are called main verb. And that main verb should be in past participle form in all the compound tenses in French. Okay. What is the first verb? The first verb is the auxiliary verb. In other words, it is the helping verb. This verb helps write the sentence in a compound tense. Okay, so you write the subject and write the auxiliary verb and then use the past participle form of the main verb, which talks about the action of the subject. This is the sentence structure of a compound tense. Now, we shall see passé composé. Now, what is passé composé? This is a tense which stands for actions completed in the past, which means past tense. Not only for past tense, it stands for present perfect also. So when a sentence is written in passé composé in French, when it is translated into English, it can be translated as past tense and also present perfect tense. This is passé composé. Now we shall see. Like I said, that there are two verbs to be used in all the compound tenses. One is the auxiliary verb and the other one is the main verb, which is in the past participle form. Now, the first one is the auxiliary verb. Here I should tell you that there are two auxiliary verbs to be used in all the compound tenses. Those two auxiliary verbs, avoir and être, only these two verbs, avoir and être, are used as the auxiliary verbs in all the compound tenses. Okay. So there are only two auxiliary verbs are there. Avoir and être only are used as the auxiliary verbs in all the compound tenses. Of course, in passé composé also, because that is one of the compound tenses. Now, what happens to this auxiliary verb is, in a compound tense, we know that the main verb is in the past participle form. The auxiliary verb changes as per the tense. Now we are learning passé composé. So we shall see what happens to the auxiliary verbs when we are writing a sentence in passé composé. When it is passé composé, okay, write the subject, then take the auxiliary verb, conjugate it in present tense. So the present conjugation of the auxiliary verb is used, and after that past participle is used. This is the sentence structure of a passé composé sentence, past and present perfect. Subject plus present tense of the auxiliary verb, and then the past participle of the main verb. Okay, now the question is, there are two auxiliary verbs, avoir and être. Let's see what these two verbs do when a sentence is written in a compound tense. And if there are two verbs, then which verb to be used? Whether it has to be avoir or être is the question. Now, the answer is that, see, there are 14 verbs. There are umpteen number of verbs in French, not only in French, in any language. Now, être has to be used as the auxiliary verb with 14 verbs and their derivatives, and also with the reflexive verbs, le verb pronomino. What I'm saying is, there are, okay, huge number of verbs, but être has to be used as the auxiliary verb with only 14 verbs and also with their derivatives. And what is the third group? The third group is the reflexive verbs. With these verbs only, être is used as the auxiliary verb. Now, what I am saying, there are 14 verbs and there are derivatives with which être has to be used as the auxiliary verbs. Now, there are the 14 verbs which are used with être. Arriver, aller, venir, entrer, partir, sortir. These verbs are conjugated with être. Some people also say that a verb of movement is used with être. These verbs, if you notice, these verbs are intransitive verbs. What is an intransitive verb? An intransitive verb is a verb which will not take a direct object. After these verbs, there will be a preposition. A direct verb will not be used, cannot be used. Such verbs are called intransitive verbs, and all these intransitive verbs are conjugated with être. Not only these 14 verbs, the derivatives. What is a derivative? Something that comes from the other verb. Now, from venir, which means to come, comes revenir. So revenir is a derivative. From partir, repartir can be formed. That is also a derivative. So not these 14 verbs and the derivatives are conjugated with être. And then also, like I said, the reflexive verbs, le verb pronomino, like se laver, se laver, s'arrêter, s'habiller. All these reflexive verbs are also conjugated with être. Okay. Now, avoir. All the other verbs are conjugated with avoir. Right? Not only in passé composé, in all the compound tenses. Remember like this, all the verbs are conjugated with avoir, but only 14 verbs and their derivatives and reflexive verbs are conjugated with être. Okay, like we have seen already in the sentence structure, the auxiliary verb is conjugated in present tense. Now, our conjugation in present tense, I believe you all know. J'ai, toi, il a, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont, elles ont. This is the present tense conjugation of our. Now, this is how a passé composé sentence is used. You write the subject, then conjugate the verb avoir in present tense, j'ai, donner. Donner means to give. And the past participle of donner is used. J'ai donné. This is passé composé. Alors, je dis que il y a quatre tomes composés en français et passé composé est un des tomes composés. Comment on écrit une phrase en passé composé? D'abord, on doit bien sûr écrire le sujet et après conjuguer le verbe auxiliaire avoir ou être à présent et après le verbe principal doit être utilisé sous forme participe passé. C'est comment on écrit une phrase en passé composé. Le sujet et la présence de verbe auxiliaire et le participe passé, the verb principal. That is how it is written. J'ai donné, tu as donné. J'ai donné is I gave and I have given. Tu as donné is you gave and you have given. It goes on like that. Il a donné, elle a donné, nous avons donné, vous avez donné, ils ont donné, elles ont donné. Okay, so write the subject, write the auxiliary verb avoir in present tense, and donner are all the verbs in passé composé except 14 verbs and their derivatives and also the verb pronominum. Now, okay, fine. We have seen about these auxiliary verbs. What happens to the main verb, which has to be written in past participle? Means how to form the past participle of a verb. Now we know that there are three groups of verbs, ER, IR, and RE. Of course, we also know that there are irregular verbs. First, let's see these regular verbs. Now, how to form the past participle of an ER verb? It's very easy. You just have to drop the last letter E. It is shown here, the last letter E. And then you have to place on the E, which will be the last letter now. Once R is dropped in any ER verb, the last letter becomes E. Okay, the E becomes the last letter. On that E, you have to place accent IU. Now that becomes past participle. It's very easy. It's very easy to remember. Drop the last letter E and on the E, place l'accent IU. Like voyager, désigner, mélanger. These are the past participles. This is how the past participle of an ER verb is formed. Okay. Now we move on to IR verb. IR verb is also very easy. Now take the IR verb, drop the last letter R. That's all. That's it. Then it becomes, the stem becomes the past participle. Examples are given. See, finir, drop the last letter R. Fini is the past participle. Grosser, drop the last letter R. Grossi. That is the past participle. So how is it written? See, il a fini son travail. He has finished his work. He finished his work. J'ai choisi une chemise. I have chosen a shirt. I chose a shirt. So subject, avoir, in avoir, the auxiliary verb in present tense, then the past participle. Now I would like to remind all of you that there are many exceptions. One has to remember it always because there are verbs, IR verbs, the past participle of which are formed in a different way. There are exceptions, let's remember, but generally the last letter R is dropped from an IR verb, then the remaining word becomes the past participle. Let's remember that. And of course, there are exceptions. Now we move on to the third one, RE verb. RE verb, how to form the past participle of the RE verb? Now again, here, what is done is, from the RE verb, the last two letters RE are dropped. Okay, ER verb, R is dropped on the E, the accent IG is placed. IR verb, R is dropped, the last letter R is dropped. The remaining word becomes the past participle. But when it's attendre, when it is, RE verb, the last two letters RE are removed, and in their place, the letter U is added. For example, attendre, past participle is attendu. Entendre, past participle is entendu. It goes on like that. That is how the past participle is framed. Uh, the past participle of the RE verb is formed like this. Okay, the example is here. Il a vendu sa maison. He sold his house. He has sold his house. Nous avons entendu. Yeah, nous avons entendu. It's here. Le bruit. He heard the noise. This is how a sentence in passé composé is written in French. Write the subject. There are two auxiliary verbs. With all the verbs, avoir is conjugated as the auxiliary verb in passé composé, which is past and present perfect in English. The auxiliary verb is conjugated in present tense. Then the main verb, which shows the action, is written in past participle form. There are two auxiliary verbs. Avoir is conjugated with almost all the verbs. Être is used as the auxiliary verb with 14 intransitive verbs and their derivatives, and also with the verb pronomino, the reflexive verbs. This is how a sentence in present in passé composé is written. Passé composé is one of the main compound tenses. Let's remember, okay, there are quite a lot to be learned. We shall see what happens when we use être as the auxiliary verb in the next class. Salut, au revoir, merci. Okay, fine, salut. We shall meet again.